Good afternoon, everybody. Got quite a few people in the call already. Oh, it's onto 2 pages on Teams. You know, it's popular when it's 2 pages on Teams, including a couple of last-minute registrations. Thanks, guys, for turning up. Welcome to this data visualization workshop. This is not one of the standard webinars that we do as part of the RSGB Analyst Network. This is a workshop. This is the opportunity for us all to be involved, which means that you all get to say things, to demo things, to turn your cameras on if you want to later on. Don't worry about that. And yeah, for us to get as nerdy as we like about data visualization, and it very much follows on from the presentation that the dynamic duo of myself and Will did at Joining the Dots. So hopefully many of you will have seen that. So yeah, I've just got a slide that I'm going to show up here, then I'll give you an opportunity to speak, Will. Oh, hold on, let's do this presenting Teams way of making this work. So today's workshop, here we go. So yeah, this is the data visualization workshop, which is a part of the RSGB Analyst Network program, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. The hosts are myself, Richard Owen from Agilicis, and Will. Say hello, Will.
Hello. Hello, Will.
Will is wearing dual hats as always. Road Safety GB Research Director and Essex Safer Roads Partnership. So I will stress once again, you know, your active participation is required in this one. We've done these kinds of workshops and roundtables in the past. It's definitely better if people can join in a lot more. Some of you may be shy. That's absolutely fine. You can do it in any way. So we'll get to the point after we've done a little bit of talking, where we'll give you all the opportunity to join in. You can do that by turning on your camera, speaking. You can share something that you might have want to show people, maybe a piece of your work or maybe a piece of somebody else's work. There's also the chat as well. So that's the opportunity for you to make comments and join in. So that's good news as well. And there will be some questions that I pose as I go along. You know, you stick hands up when there's questions. I think we're all pretty familiar with how we use Microsoft Teams for now. So yeah, I'm going to go through a couple examples. It really starts off very, very basic. I'm going to demonstrate a couple of tools that have been used, and then Will's going to show some examples of how you can use data visualizations to put forward road safety arguments for specific interventions, for example. But you know, if there's 4 kinds of things that I'd like us to discuss between us here is what do we mean by visualization? So hopefully we get that off to a pretty good start in terms of visualization. What examples are there? As I said, we're going to show a couple, but yeah, you can join in as well on that one. What techniques are good and bad? And I always find it better to look at the bad first of all, because it just makes it easier to understand what really is good from that. And then what tools we're using. I mean, this could be as nerdy as you like individually. It may be that you still just use Excel, and there's nothing wrong with just using Excel. It does an enormous amount. So without further ado, we will kick off on this then. So here's some examples of data visualizations that I think are obvious. So we have one on the left there from the Department for Transport. You know, it's got a nice clear heading. We've got good contrast between the different bars there, something that you always need to make sure that you're careful on, making sure that you've got good contrast within your slides. The axis isn't labeled on the left-hand side, but it does say at the top that it's reported road fatalities. So I think it gives you a big enough clue. Not only that, but they have put actual numbers on the top of the bars as well, which is really brilliant because it means that you're not trying to guess and just estimate what's going on there. They have put names at the bottom, but they're also symbols at the same time. So I was trying to wrap my brain and think of, you know, where is the simplest, easy to understand that anybody, even if you haven't got maths GCSE, you'll be able to understand what's going on there. And I think that's a pretty good example of what's going on. Now, I am obliged, of course, to show maps. And I've picked another map here on the right-hand side. And I think this is a good example of a clear map that should be easy for most people to understand. So it's looking at a map of speed limits within an individual town. It's got a nice key there, which you always make sure that your maps have got a key. I'm very guilty of not doing that at times. And there's enough contrast between those so that you can more or less see what's going on there. You can see where's 20, you can see where's 30. We've got some 40 within there, and then a reasonable amount of 60. So that's another good way, I think, of symbolizing maps in the background. And then, yeah, you've got the nice grey scale map behind it. If you put it on top of a colored map, then I think that one would be hard to see. So I'm going to stand up and say that those are pretty good examples of things that make a lot of sense. Here is a chart that I quickly whipped out of Mast Online, and I didn't include the title. So at the moment, this is just casualties by crash date within the system. So we've got the number of casualties on the left-hand side, and we've got the crash date that goes along the bottom, but it hasn't actually been labeled, and it's pretty old and ropey looking, isn't it? And you can't actually see what the individual data points may mean associated with it. I think most people looking at that report will want to see a download of the data that sits underneath it. That is an interesting chart in itself as well. So that is actually a chart showing the number of casualties that have happened within Great Britain within 20-mile-per-hour speed limits over the last decade and a bit, just showing the massive increase in casualties in 20 limits, which must mean that they're a bad idea. Of course, it is completely ignoring the fact that there's been a large increase in the amount of roads covered by 20-mile-per-hour limits. So yeah, even if I had labeled that correctly, there's a story that's missing underneath that most people wouldn't, well, a lot of people wouldn't understand. Here is another example of a map that perhaps is a little bit fussy and overcomplicated. It is trying to analyze that issue of where 20 miles per hour limits are. I haven't included a key on this, and I've actually got two different types of data overlaid. And because it's zoomed out at such a level, yes, you can kind of get an idea. So if I told you that the reds are where 30s are more likely to be and the blues are where it's more likely to be 20, it would give you some idea of what's happening, but it only give you a rough idea at a very zoomed out perspective. It's not very analyzable in that format in itself. So there we go. So I can show you bad examples as well as good ones. And furthermore, I'm going to show you one more example of a chart. And this is where I'm going to ask you to stick some stuff in chat. What don't you personally like about this chart? Are there things that that annoy you about it? Is there things that is unexplained within there? Does anybody have a clue what this is trying to demonstrate if you see this chart on its own? So I'll give you a couple of seconds to be horrible and hateful about this chart, which was in a published report that I produced about 8 years ago. So yeah, pour some scorn in the chat if you like. Waiting for that first comment. I'm not going to move on until I get at least one. Yeah. Good idea, Carla. Yeah, I'm not really defining between different areas of the country. Oh, yeah, they're not all cities, are they? Yeah. There we go. There's an error in there. Well, Paul, exactly. What did I mean by cycling risk? The data is not clear. Yeah, well, Axel, well done. You have identified what I was trying to prove, which is good. You get a gold star for actually seeing through what I was meaning to do there. It is supposed to be showing that the more cyclists that you have, which is the x-axis, the cycling level per 1,000 population, the lower the risk goes, which is that cycling risk per 100,000 cyclists. Yeah, good question. What does linear mean in this context? It doesn't work well as a standalone. I thought somebody was going to moan that I'd done it on a black background with neon text. And I got, and that was the thing that most people didn't like about it. I seem to remember that I produced this report. Excel had just introduced some new templates in Excel 2017 or whatever it was when it was called back then. And I went, oh, we can do black charts with neon writing. Yeah, I'll definitely make sure that I do that. But I think style got ahead of the substance in there. I mean, you can't really analyze that data and understand it without having read through about 3 or 4 pages of a report and then seen some of the raw data that sits behind it. It's trying to show something, but it's not absolutely clear. Right, so there's some examples of some data visualization that I've picked out. Now I'm just going to go through a few good examples of data tools, and I'm going to pick stuff from the DFT first of all. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen, and then I'm going to share another screen instead, which should be this one over here. Oh, it's just timed out while I've been waiting. So yeah, if you go onto the DFT's website, you can see an example of 3 different tools that you can access. So this is the new collision analysis tool. So what you can do is you can use this to get information about casualties, collisions, and vehicles. It's a way of you kind of filtering and querying data from the Stats 19 data set. So it works quite well. It's built in R Shiny, which is quite a lightweight tool, not always easy for lots of people to host, but it's a way of producing data tables. So you can see here we've got for 2023, we have the number of killed, serious, or slight, adjusted, by the way, if anybody knows what that means, from a member of public perspective, I'm sure you all do, and then the total number of casualties within there. And then what you can do is you can simply add other filters. So if you just wanted to go and see motorways, you can do that quite simply, and it updates very, very quickly. And then you can choose casualty type. So if I wanted to only have a look at HGV occupants, I can do that on there. So yeah, smaller numbers in terms of HGV occupants. Doesn't tell you about crashes involving HGVs. If I did that one, then I might want to start to have a look at some of the tools. And then you can, choose some other variables, when it occurred, what the collision circumstances, what the vehicles involved are, the driver details. So I could have a look at the sex of the driver, and it starts to break those down. So one female HGV driver was seriously injured on motorways within Great Britain in 2023. So it is kind of a visualization, but it's also a way that you can just get hold of data that you can then visualize yourself. You could, if you knew and had labeled this properly, cut this out and then put it into a report, but you're probably going to want to download it and use, aforementioned Excel yourself. Now, moving on from that and using the same data set, the DFT, as well as the collision analysis tool, CAT, they have created Maverick as well. And I'd like to applaud them for just coming up with an acronym that sounds quite cool, first of all. So this is the Maverick tool, and this is the data that they've used for mapping and visualizing road injury casualties. Okay, I just got the feeling they came up with Maverick first and then decided they want to just make it match. So this is a bit like a lot of those other visualization tools, such as Crash Map. And you can zoom in, and then let's have a look within Coventry, and you can see that it's starting to tell you information about the total number of casualties, number of collisions, seriously injured. You can then click on an individual collision if you want to, and then have a look at all of the data associated with it. So we've got the unhelpful field name, but then the description that goes alongside it, and it's got filters that you can do. So if I wanted to do HGV occupants, I'm going to need to zoom out a little bit there. Funnily enough, you find HGV occupants on the major road network. So this is a way of mapping and visualizing data that the DFT have done. It's built using an ArcGIS piece of software. And then is hosted online for people to use. and we've got quite significant experience of using this kind of data as well. So there's a mapping based approach, but there's some indicators or statistics that go alongside it. If you wanted to go down a more of a BI approach, so this is Power BI, and the BI stands for, well, I'll see if somebody puts it in the chat, see if somebody knows what the BI bit of Power BI stands for. This is a way of not thinking about maps, but thinking about interactive mapping. So again, we have the same kinds of filters on this left-hand side. Automatically. Now, what that's done here is that's then filtered this bar chart that we saw at the bottom here, which was casualties of age and group and sex, by that 16 to 24. But if I reset that one, you can see that actually that it's just changing this chart. And the way that Power BI and some of these other business intelligence tools work is that you can use these as filters as well. So if I change that to the 16 to 24 filter, it then filters all of the other charts by it. But I don't particularly like the way Power BI does this, because you've got to rely on the fact that that darker purple bit is now a subset of the lighter purple bit, which we were showing before. So it could be that just using that casualty filter is a better way of doing it, because then you actually update the charts themselves. I would probably take off the filterability of these individual elements. Sometimes it works, sometimes I don't think it's particularly helpful, especially when you're looking at particularly small numbers. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of that one in Power BI, but I know there are different ways that you can do that. So that was the introduction from me in terms of examples of data sharing and visualization. Others of you may have some examples that you will want to show as well. I'm just going to hand over to Will before we open it up to discussion around those 4 different items from the rest of you. I'll put those in the chat as well. And then if there's anything that people do want to share and talk about, we've got quite a lot of time still left on that. Over to you, Will.
Thanks, Richard. I'm trying to share my screen. I'm not sure if I was successful at that attempt. I'll just come back to the workshop and try again. Right, I'll try one more time. Let me know if you see a blank PowerPoint appear.
Blank PowerPoint, but it's in the presenter mode.
Okay.
Normally you just click present in Teams. That's the way to do it.
Yeah,
that's your slide notes, master.
Yeah, okay. I'll just do it this way round. It's not all that important. Yeah, so you should be able to see just the slide editing screen now. Hopefully with a blank PowerPoint on it. So the first slide I want to show is very much a kind of back to basics approach. Because I'm a bit of a nerd, I like collecting things on my phone that amuse me around data and visualization. I'm sure a few of you have seen this before. It's kind of a meme that does the rounds. But I chose it because it fulfills one of the requirements of an infographic, in that it is very clear. It takes you half a second to look at it and you know exactly what it's saying. The only thing I've added to it is the percentage figure, because that was something, a bit of labeling that was missed out there. So yeah, just to illustrate the importance of clarity in data visualization. The next one I want to show is kind of more of a bad example. I have I've removed the name from this. It's from a data visualization company, a professional data visualization company, but not one that operates in the road safety sphere. And I think that's important to know, because it's It looks quite nice at first impression, but when you start to try and work out what it's trying to tell you, you get stuck very quickly, and that betrays a lack of expertise in the subject matter, which I think is very important to understand a lot about the data that you're trying to present and what you're trying to say with it. When you look at this, they've got the Stats 19 data from DFT and divided it up by highway authorities and given you the number of KSI casualties by highway authority. You can see places like Kent and Surrey and Hampshire and Essex are quite dark on that scale. A lot of all the London boroughs are very light, so it makes you think it's quite not very many casualties in London. But the problem is this isn't adjusted for traffic and it's not adjusted for population. So essentially it tells you how big the different highway authorities are by a proxy measure of the number of KSI on their network. On this particular platform, you can click on the highway authority and look in a bit more detail, but that screen doesn't tell you any more than what's here. So there's a high risk of people being misled or forming perverse conclusions on it. Yeah, comment there. The key needs simplifying. Yeah, we've got 216.66 of a KSI. I'm not quite sure how you arrive at that. Yeah, but simplifying the bins within that map key would also be a good move to improve that particular visualization. So moving on to some practice that I quite like now. This is a graph I've seen a number of times in a number of different guises. It's not perfect. It does take a minute or two to look at and digest, and the x-axis hasn't been labelled. After reading the headline, you should be able to deduce the x-axis is the age of a driver at the point that they gain their licence. And what's been done here is they've plotted crash risk over time from cohorts who've acquired their licence at different ages. And from that, they've been able to, the analysis they've conducted has been able to isolate the effect of age over time on crash risk and the effect of experience. And it shows that age and experience are both important variables in crash risk. But what it particularly highlights is that crash risk drops rapidly after licensing. And that is one of the arguments that is made in support of graduated driver licensing. And I think once you've digested this graph, it's quite impactful. Another area of graduated driver licensing is the case around peer-aged passengers. So this graph plots for two age groups, the 17 to 25-year-olds in red, who are maybe subject of a GDL scheme, and 26 plus as a group to compare them to, and looks at, within Stats 19, the age difference between the driver and any injured passengers. With this, it's important to understand the limitations of Stats 19. So again, the visualization on its own might be at risk of misinterpretation. So the narrative explanation around this is also very important. But again, it shows a stark contrast between two things. It's the simplicity that helps this with its impact. You can see a much bigger spike for people who are aged within a couple of years of the driver than you do for drivers aged 26 plus. And then the third thing I want to look at around GDL is a differential in risk at different times of the day and hours of the week. This is a grid that divides the week up into separate hours, and then you can look at the distribution of crashes involving young drivers across the week, and then you can look at the distribution of drivers aged 26 plus. The analysis behind this looks at the differences between those two risks. So it then displays the disproportionate risk of young drivers at different times of the week. Again, that highlights the nighttime period and across the week, but early hours of the morning, late night, at weekends as well, for young drivers. Used in a combination, those three data visualizations help build the case and build the argument and help people understand some of the data supports graduated driver licensing. I like the visualizations because they help make the case, but they're not perfect either. There's always that room for improvement. So that's what I'm hoping this workshop can then move on to, that we can look at some ideas, we can look at what's good, we can look at areas for improvement for different people's infographics. So that's really what I wanted to kind of help prompt a bit of conversation. I'll hand back to Richard, who can hopefully encourage you to show anything that you've brought with you today as well for us to discuss. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Yeah, this is an opportunity for everybody here to talk about their favourite visualizations, the things that they liked most, the things that they dislike the most. So yeah, we've got another 30 minutes left of this. So if you don't volunteer content, you get to finish early, but possibly there won't be the opportunity for you to get as much out of it. So yeah, please don't be shy. And I can see that Nick has certainly not been shy. Thank you, Nick, for putting your hand up first of all. Like a racing hare, he has leapt off and put his hand up first of all. So yeah, over to you. What would you like to talk about?
Okay. I can't seem to share.
Oh, Steve or Nathan might be able to fix that for you, or me. I can.
Only meeting organisation and presenters can share, it says.
We're working on it. Yeah.
Okay.
I can mute you. I can mute you and disable your camera, but I don't have all the permissions.
Okay, I've now got a sharing thing. I want to show you something that we did for National Highways, getting on for 2.5 years ago now, which actually encodes, did a lot of research. A lot of this is academically based, and we produced at the end of it a quick start guide for communicating analysis. If you get to the visualization section of that, then you can start to see the sort of the bits that we're talking about today. And Teresa and I have, are delicately poised to turn this into something that could be used by any organisation. And I'll give you links to that. But essentially, if you're thinking about visualization, the starting point really is to match your analysis category to graph choice, i.e., yeah, and there's lots of different options, but it is critical to keep within the general area of analysis. So if it's a deviation, there are certain chart choices. If you go outside of that, you're not going to be able to communicate well. Distribution has all sorts of opportunities. You can use lines, bars, points, or 2D areas. Most of our work, though, was then about how you take that, and there's lots of narrative there, but how you take that and then show what good looks like versus what bad looks like, and these are the things that you need to do to declutter and clarify. Remove the borders, no point in having them. Remove the grid lines, no point in having them. Remove the data markers, why on earth are they there? And then tidy up and simplify the axis labels. It is a no-no to put axis labels vertically, because it immediately you lose the attention of the person because they have to start reading the thing. And the whole idea of a graph is that it's supposed to be something you can see at a glance. There's no point in having all these numbers, which you can see here, because you're making a specific point. And if people want a table, fine. We can give them a table. It's confusion between visualization and the data table, which is
So
the source.
first question on that one then, Nick. So would you say that it is better to have a more simplified table that tries to get across a message, but then would you just put the tables within an appendix separately?
Yeah, yeah, and that's what we do. And in fact, we've got a live example now, because the next thing we were commissioned to do with you guys was to work for National Highways on their safety statistics across 7 different reports, and and apply these uh, rules of best practice to the data. So we got a live example. Um, Once you've done the declutter and uh, that kind of thing, then you can start to use specific attributes. You can apply pre-attentive attributes. So you can see the one on the left gives you the top 10 concerns per thousand, but on the right you can actually use color to highlight, and then little comments, so that you're using a mixture of color and comment in order to home in on particular things. Example, on the bottom, you see bus punctuality in a high street. Uh, the one on the left doesn't tell you very much. The one on the right starts to give you a visualization of the data that clarifies the message that you're trying to communicate. Um, so it's that kind of thing. And we've got all the learned, stuff behind this as well. There are other sections that deal with developing the story, and so forth. But those are the particular things that, and we've got lots and lots of different graph types, and you can see when it's best to use them.
So that resource that you've produced there, obviously that was commissioned for a client.
Yeah.
Is this the kind of work that you typically work for authorities
Yes.
on producing these handbooks?
It would be if more people knew that this existed.
Ah, well, there's about 20 something people on this call that knows it exists at the moment. What do you think about consistency in terms of color schemes versus making things look different? So whenever I've done presentations, and sometimes I'm doing a presentation on an individual topic, and I'll end up producing 8 charts in a row for a slide deck that look almost exactly the same with the same color scheme. Do you think it's better to be consistent in terms of color and look and feel, or do you want to just suddenly throw in something a little bit more random to try and get people's attention?
No, the random to get attention is never a good idea. And of course, when the commissioning person may say, "Give me something pretty," it's not relevant. This is absolutely firmly rooted in the form follows function school, which was developed by Johannes Itten in the Bauhaus. Anything else? Any decoration? Irrelevant. Use of color that doesn't conform to something. I mean, there's two things that govern choice of color. First and foremost, accessibility. If you get a very low contrast between two colors, then that will not communicate to somebody who cannot see the color differences. So that's critical. But up there and quite close to that is the organization's corporate identity. So the colors that the organization uses, one should be guided by. So one then looks within that for the most accessible colors and applies those. Um, and that's exactly the rule we follow with National Highways. And National Highways has, two main colors, a dark blue and a light blue, and then it has a, very carefully selected series of hues that are in the same sort of contrast range. So you can use them with confidence. They will all work together. And we ain't run out of colours yet. And we've done, what do you reckon, Teresa? It must be upwards of, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 different chart types and numbers of charts running into the thousands.
Yeah, I think so, something like that. And yeah, I haven't got really much to add on what you've said.
What about, I was going to say, on the use of color, but and I understand that you want to be able to use corporate colors, but what about the use of colors that in themselves portray an indicator? So obviously red to green. So I'm a big fan of using red to green because it's really easy for people to understand that red is bad and green is good. Hey, look, you've got your ticks and your crosses that use
Yeah.
red and green at the same time. Would you still go with that approach?
It depends always on the question you're trying to answer. There's no rule that says you can't use red, you can't use green, or that they are. But one has to. There are certain things about the way that we perceive color. So red, the human eye gravitates towards red. You can see a tiny speck of red on a page. It is the most visible color according to the way that the human brain is wired. It wouldn't work with a hawk, but the hawk's brain is wired to see movement, and a hawk has the ability to see movement to a much greater resolution than we see it. So it depends on how you're made as a creature. But in our case, and generally we're only communicating safety statistics to other human beings, then you need to know how we perceive things in order to reliably communicate. But using a lot of red can be very shouty, and you don't want to exhaust your reader. Imagine a swimming pool chart in which you have lots of color. If you use red to green, then it's quite tiring to look at. And also, when you merge red and green, if you're on a screen, it's fine because you get yellow in the middle. But if it's a printed publication, you'll get brown because pigments of reflective color work differently to RGB, red, green, blue TV color, if you like.
Well, didn't know that. Should have probably paid more attention at art class, I guess. I was just thinking about Will's swimming pool chart that he showed earlier with the red and green in it. I think it might have been one of those more default Excel colors. And talking of default Excel colors, I'd love to see a pie chart for once that showed the percentage of data visualizations produced in the Excel default standard color scheme versus anything else. But I suspect that it's very high.
I'm going to drop something into the chat, which is just a link to our temporal method. And I think we ought to leave it there for us for today, because I think we've been yattering away for quite some time.
I think it was very valuable, and this type of guide looks like something that could be essential reading for analysts. So yeah, that was very, very welcome and useful things. I think I'd like to highlight Nathan's comment about simpler, less information is very often better for getting the message across. So it's avoiding the temptation to try and say too much with one infographic to avoid that confusion. But yeah, so much more things that aren't quite so obvious and that I've learned in that very short space of time. So thank you very much, Nick.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. It was all Teresa's work. I just tend to be a bit more.
Well, thank you, Teresa, as well.
Hello, I've just posted the application of what we've done to it. We have taken up time here, but the road safety overview report for national highways, there were a couple of questions in the chat of what we're doing. You can have a look, the links there, you can have a look. The most recent report, the 2022 report, includes a lot more visuals than it has done previously. And our goal was to apply the principles that Nick's been talking about in that guide that we produced, to make the content of that public report that NH provide more available. So I've just put the link in the chat, and you can have a look in your own time and have a look between that and the previous years.
I understand you did the smart motorways report as well, which could have been fun as well in terms of data visualization, trying to get across complicated messages.
We did the graphs for that, but National Highways used their own internal design team to actually produce the report and did a great job. But it's that's the last in the series now, so far as we know.
Yeah, and that has just come out, and yeah, that does also, as Nick said, we did the graphs for that. I mean, we did the graphs for this. The content is produced by National Highways, but the visuals were indeed done by us, and for the same reason, to try and help improve the accessibility and insight from the data that is available from you guys.
Well, thanks very much. It's great to have a couple of professionals on there that really do understand data visualization and why we do things. Right, back open to everybody else in the room. You know, are there data visualizations tools, techniques that you would particularly recommend? Are there any resources that you've published online that you think you'd like to show? Hopefully nobody has been intimidated a little bit too much by some of the quality that we've seen on the show today. I've got a couple of questions of you lined up if nobody is going to stick their hand up. So I'm going to do an awkward silence for 10 seconds and see if anybody wants to volunteer anything. Axel, thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't know if I can share my screen. Let me just put this in the two links in the chat. If you can click on that, or maybe you can share it. If it doesn't work to share it from my screen, it's probably better if you share it, Richard. But this is, I'm not sure whether it's a good example, bad example. What I thought was interesting is the dynamic element of it. So this is a European project, Data for Road Safety. One of my colleagues involved in this. And it does show, and this is just a demonstration. I think if you're part of this, you get sort of the real data behind it. But it does sort of show how different events sort of change over time, which I think can be another interesting way if you're looking at safety data. So don't just get a static picture of, oh, this is for 2022 or 2023. You can get something over a particular time period that you're interested in. I assume you can specify what time you're looking at, but you could, for example, see during periods of rain, obviously you would expect slippery roads to increase. Does that then correlate with collisions that happen on that wet road surface? Do you see particular patterns happening? Do you see this worse in some areas than in others? Why does in one area of your network, when it rains, you have slippery road incidents indicating, but that doesn't lead to heightened or increased collisions in another part of your network? It does. So it allows you to sort of look at other things that's sort of static data, if you like, when you just look at a particular 12-month period, for example, as you often do, would perhaps not allow you to do. Same with some of these other ones, accidents, broken down vehicles. Do you see not just where they happen in terms of geographic area, which is what a lot of the maps do, but also do you see this happening sort of over particular times? Do you see this always happening after, I don't know, people drive home from an event?
In terms of
just to share this, yeah, I'm not involved in this. I know one of my colleagues is, so I'm playing. Yeah.
So you know, the purpose of this map is not for it to be particularly analytical, though, is it? It's more to demonstrate the fact that data are available. Would you agree?
I think so at this stage, anyway. But yes, you know, I think you can do stuff with this data. I think it's first demonstrating that it is available and what is available. I think, you know, there's probably lots of interesting stuff you can do with the data behind. I don't know quite what they've done with that. And as this involves car manufacturers, there's also the issue about you know, ownership of data and what is public and who can do what with the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. I know a little of the data for road safety legislation, effectively, isn't it? Because European countries and manufacturers are required to share information for a certain number of groups of incident types on the road network, slippery road, etc. I'm not aware of many people that have used it in anger. It may be that it's used within cars to warn people. That's where I thought it might be used. You know, if you had a car that was ahead of you on the road that was reporting slippery weather, or there was a crash or something like that, hopefully it would then ping back to the vehicle behind you. But yeah, in terms of making people know that it's available, I think, you know, that kind of visualization, which is showing very, very recent data, just the last 48 hours, and sample sizes that are involved, I think is really impactful.
Yeah, I think what's very useful about it and powerful is that ability to show geographic trends over time. Because a lot of analysis is reported in PowerPoints or printed reports, which doesn't allow you to do that. So I think the crucial thing there is having the right platform to display that analysis. Within that visualization, you can look at a geographic trend changing over time, but then there's in some cases that might be a tool for an analyst to look at that geographic trend over time, and then in a final report present their interpretation of that visualization in some form of final report. So I think I guess what I'm saying is it's not only a quite an impactful tool to display the end product, but it can be used kind of further upstream at more the analytical phase to help the analysts find reach a finding which they then present.
Okay. So I've got a little poll that I'm going to attempt to run now. Let's see if it actually works, which should come up on the screen. And it is, what data visualization and analysis tools are you using? So this is your opportunity to type in the box the types of tools that you're using yourself. So we've seen some examples. I've shown some, hinted at some of the technologies. If you would like to submit and put them in, let's see over the next 30 seconds or so what kinds of things that you're out there using at the moment. You can put in multiple responses. I think I'm going to test that out now myself. Bear with. You can do multiple ones. Yeah, keep going. We'll give this another few seconds, I think. Keep going. Now, of course, from this word cloud, it is impossible to do accurate analysis. There is no data table that sits behind it, I don't think, unless I haven't figured out what the view results button is going to do. I can export the results apparently and then have a look at them. But the way that this presents it is in terms of making things big and in the middle. So Excel just rules the world, which many of the, let's say, younger members of our team find quite hilarious, because a lot of them just haven't really got a clue how to use Excel because they're using R or they're using Python or something else to carry out their data visualization. But let's say that Excel is still the go-to for other people. In terms of what's coming up next, Power BI seems quite popular. Does anybody want to mention specifically anything that they use Power BI for and how they find it? You can stick your hand up, or you can just put something in the chat if you answered yes to Power BI, or a link to something that you may have published yourself. Carla.
Hi, all. So for me, Power BI, I use it in order to basically gather data and analyze how I'm prioritizing some of my schemes, and especially my education, training, publicity and programs. Basically, there's many indices that I have, but what comes out of it, or the outcome of it, is a map. I'm just trying to load it up so I can show people, but it was essentially a map, a color-coded map, and then to the left-hand side, it's literally where you can filter and show from RAG rated, red to green. Obviously, red, like we said before, being the worst affected, needing the most attention, and they'll be at the top of that list in order to get the, shall we say, the resources they require, down to at the bottom where it's green, it's fine, we just need to monitor. And that's how I use it basically to justify my spend and also my delivery every single financial year.
So we've got some noise that's going on outside the building, some protesting farmers about something or other. Hopefully you can't hear that. So you said that was individual record data that you're mapping, or was it area-based analysis? Sorry.
So it's area-based for Westminster, so it's individual locations, but if you put it all together, it gives you a whole picture of what's happening in Westminster, all based around schools.
And is that something that you use internally, or is it something that you would give to decision makers?
I would use internally, but it goes to our cabinet member as part of a briefing note, so they could make a decision on yes to progress, no to progress, or do they need further information to make a decision.
Yeah. And so I'm just going to press you on that a little bit more. And what's the advantage of using Power BI? Is it because it's interactive and it allows them to drill down into more detail, or is it because you just hate Microsoft Excel?
No, well, I've got two. I have a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. There's literally, I think, is it 63 the last time I collected different pieces of data. And they can be individually drilled down, but the Power BI shows a summarized version of that data. So it's an easily accessible one, shall we say, for our ward councillors and cabinet members that don't or will not necessarily need to see the Excel spreadsheet of all that information, because they're not, or they will not have the time to read that, or potentially to always understand it. And plus, it's just a bit geeky for me because I can see changes and I can update it every year and have year-on-year trends for myself for interrogating that data. We haven't published it, so it is still all internal, but if it's a case of we do, it will probably be published on my school travel plan programme page, just to show how we've come to the decision we've come to. But our briefing notes are published as well. So if it's in there as an appendix, you probably see it as a static, shall I say, screenshots, rather than the live kind of demonstration.
So it sounds like you've been able, you've got a fairly defined target audience. So have you been able to tailor it to them to prevent misinterpretation or questions that they could answer by looking at it themselves?
Yes, so we've got at the minute, and that's something I'm trying to make a bit easier. So a cover page if they needed to access it themselves. And also it's literally just having a walk through the system. So if our cabinet member changes or they wanted to have a walkthrough as to what it shows or how it looks like, or to interpret that data, I do that literally one-on-one, either through Teams or in person.
Okay. One thing I've encountered a number of years ago, we put together a Power BI dashboard for our community speedwatch groups. So on paper it's one target audience, but in reality it's getting on for 1,000 people of a cohort that are ever changing and have got mixed IT literacy skills, so that it would be very painful to do that walkthrough for all of them. So I created a YouTube video that did that walkthrough to kind of just as like an efficiency. So I think the walkthrough approach for Power BI it can be very effective and help people sort of get to grips with that platform. But if you find you have to do it a lot, then yeah, I'd recommend kind of doing a screen record on it to kind of save yourself repeated goes at it.
Definitely. But yeah, it's still a work in progress, don't get me wrong. I might change it all. It might be a new platform that I find fascinating and try and use that.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So there was, I don't need to share that bit. That's not going to work. We have actually run out of time, which is a bit of a shame. Thanks for everybody that turned up, everybody that listened, and everybody that joined in. Will and I really want to see as many people joining in as possible in the future, and we'd like to do this as a regular session at least once a year, with an opportunity for people to join in and show some of the things that they're doing. If you think that that's a really good idea, then please do pop something in the chat and say, yeah, if you gave me a couple of days to prepare something, I'd definitely turn up. But if we're barking up the wrong tree and you want more of a presentation webinar style approach, then we can definitely do that instead. But hopefully you can all get something out of this individual meeting, and we'll hopefully see you on more of these events in the future. Will, was there anything you wanted to finish off by saying?
No, I think, yeah, just echo what you said. I noticed Axel had a hand up, but it's taken back down. But nothing to add from me, but thanking everyone for turning up.
I'll put it in the chat, given that we're out of time. So
there we go. Well, thanks, Axel. I think, yeah, anybody else, this chat will stay open if anybody does want to put anything in there. And that would be brilliant. If there's a way of making you less shy, Paul, I didn't think that was the problem, then that would be great. But yeah, no, thanks very much, everybody. Please do keep the conversation going and let us know if you'd like more of these kinds of things in the future. So thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.